So today we're doing a real quick basic edit of a how-to video of how to make clones. But before we jump into that, I want to show a little bit, what do I have on my desk? So what we have on my desk is my MacBook Pro here. We have up in the wall here my 43-inch monitor for, it's not a high quality monitor, so it's not my color grading, but it's just nice to have the space there. I have my 27-inch monitor here. I also have my iPad over here that's set up to be able to see the color grading. That way I have as much space as possible. I like to have a lot of space. Some people edit just in one screen. I can't do that anymore. The more screens, the better. I've edited on 3 to 4 screens for the last 6 years, something like that, and I can't go back. Like when I get stuck on the trip and have this one monitor on my MacBook, it's kind of difficult. So the other things I have is also I have a wireless Magic Mouse here because I'm not a huge fan of the trackpad. I know some people really like the trackpads, but I also have a Shadow Pro 2. I really enjoy this. This helps me be able to do some of the basic quick movements throughout Premiere. Got a lot of shortcuts, can do the quick frame by frame, play, stop. All the basics what I really need is on here. My primary actions that I do are on this thing here, so it really speeds up editing. So let's jump into editing. So a big thing for editing is make sure things are organized. That is not just on the computer, but it's also in the environment around you. So I do the best I can to keep my desk clear. There's been many times where it wasn't clear, and it has made editing much more difficult. You want that clear space just to make sure you're open and free. You don't have that clutter all around you, because that really impacts everything you do when you just visually clutter all around. And if you've gotten to this point, you probably noticed I'm not actually using my Shadow Pro a whole lot. I'm actually using like keyboards. Because this particular editing is a lot of doing just basic cuts and deleting that cut. I don't like ripple deleting. I don't have that built into here. Most of my more complex editing tools are ones in here. This is a basic edit, so it's not using the Shadow Pro much. I know I showed off, that's why I have on my desk, but I'm not using it a lot. So continuing with being clutter free, I really like to keep my timeline as simple as possible. There's some people who like to show off how many different layers and everything they've put together. I think a better edit and a better editor is one who can keep everything simple. 1, 2, maybe 3 layers on top of each other is best. All right, so now I'm going to jump into doing a little bit of color grading. This is the end. Most of it doesn't need color grading because it's a screen capture, but I am going to be color grading what I recorded of myself at the beginning. And this is actually, I think, one of my favorite parts. I don't go super crazy in color grading for something like this, but I do find it a lot of fun. So I do adjustment layers and put those on here, because that basically affects everything that's below it. Any effect that I put into this adjustment layer, all the layers below it get affected. I like to use adjustment layers even if I'm just doing one clip, because it's easier to turn on and off. This clip I cut a few times. That way I don't have to copy and paste it over, and if I made a mistake, I have to go back and delete and figure out why I just on one spot. So that's why I like to use adjustment layers. Then I go into my effects. I've put into my favorites Lumetri color. I think Adobe is actually pretty good with their basic color grading. If you want to go super crazy color grading, yeah, you probably want to get something like DaVinci Resolve. So the basics in Premiere are pretty good. So we go to just the basic correction here, and we go to highlights and shadows, and this is where we make our adjustments. Right now it's actually kind of hard for me to see it in here. We are going to move this over here so you can actually see what I'm doing here. So I'm recording this in pretty flat recording, so it's going to look actually kind of awful right away, because this is what it looks by default. It looks flat. There you go. Put it back to this. It's just flat and it looks kind of meh. Well, the reason why that gives me a higher dynamic range actually gives me a lot more control later on. I recorded this in 8-bit. If you don't know what that is, we'll probably talk about that some other time. But basically, there's a lot of color there that has a flexibility to become more color and more variations with stuff, but it's not there by, it's not seen by default. So we have to bring some of that stuff out. So I'm going to bring some of the highlights up, and you can see over on the screen here, we actually have our Lumetri scopes, which tells me what is the highest, what is the brightest, what is the darkest. We have videos on Lumetri scopes as well. So I'm bringing the highlights up, bringing the shadows down, make it just a little bit darker. But the big thing is saturation. We bring that up a little bit. That's maybe a little bit higher. We're probably going with something like 175. This camera usually I'm between 150 and 200 on increasing the saturation to get the right look. I have my overhead lights on, which are a little bit yellower than my main light here. I've got to turn the overhead. That's not a big deal for something like this, but that's why my skin color is just slightly a little bit more yellow. I can play around with that a little bit. So do this in tint, maybe -3, and that just pulls out some of the yellow, because if I go really far, it actually becomes more green. Or if I go, the temperature is probably the one I actually want to adjust a little bit. Let's adjust that one to -5. Now my skin tones are a little bit better, so let's go back to 200 on the saturation. Now that looks pretty good. Basically, the white balance, what the camera sees as actual color, was just slightly off. I have my main light set to 5600 Kelvin, but my office light, my ceiling ones are about 2800 to 3000, something like that. So when those colors mixed, it didn't quite work right. My main light, you can see in the background here, is much stronger, so it dominated, but it did get slightly off there. So there's the basic color grading. I am going to give it a slight vignette as well. So I don't want a lot, just a little bit. Let's see what 0.4 looks like. That's still just a little bit too hard. So we're going to do a 0.2. Just a tiny bit to kind of help bring I'm going to turn it on and off. So it brings the focus in on me a little bit more. So we're going to just go with that. Turn it back on. And you see here I got the jumps. The reason I was able to do the jumps here is that I recorded this once again 8K, even though my final output is going to be 4K. So we ended up changing the scale on this 50%, makes it look full screen. And then when we go to setting 5%, I'm able to do those jump ins without losing the resolution. So this is kind of what it looks like. Thanks for watching this editing video. If you have any comments, thoughts, if you want to see something else, let me know. These are my really basic. I'm not doing these to get a whole bunch of views. I'm just doing this because I want to have a community of people able just to see what filmmaking is like, what we do. And if you're just curious, just want to watch stuff like this, I've thought about possibly doing live videos of me just doing editing. People can ask questions about stuff while I'm doing that. If you are interested in something like that, put it down in the comments below, like, share this video, all that kind of stuff. It really helps. And once again, I'm not doing this to just get a ton of views. There's ways I could do that. Otherwise, I'm doing this because I love filmmaking. And I want to share that love with others. So if you have any questions about how to do stuff, please let me know.